Okay, so Sharon, let's say it's been 2 or 3 years and 3 jobs since I've even touched my resume. What should I do?
Okay. In a case like that, you definitely need to update your resume. But sometimes people are surprised to learn it's not their resume that needs to be looked at. And if you're getting calls for interviews, it's probably not your resume. But let's say it has been 2 or 3 years since you've updated your resume last. I really encourage people to take some look at some key areas. First and foremost, objectives, very old school, almost virtually obsolete. We just simply don't use those anymore. What we do instead is a professional summary of our career. So a summary is an overview of our career. And that summary needs to be compelling. Hiring managers, recruiters maybe spend 15 seconds skimming your resume. Wow. Maybe 15 seconds. If they have 400 resumes, you can count on it being less. If they're not seeing what they need in that summary, they may not continue looking at the rest of your resume. So summary is critical. Developing a compelling, useful, comprehensive summary, and those seem counterproductive, but they're not, is critical. And that summary needs to have lots of keywords in it. So keywords seem to be a mystery to a lot of people. Where do I get keywords? How do I find it? Here's a really good way to think about keywords. When you search for a job, what words do you put in Google to find the job? Those are your keywords. Oh. So the same works for your resume. When somebody would be searching for you, the title that you're doing or the type of work you're doing, what would they use as the keywords to search for you in Google, for example? Those are the type of words that need to go into a resume and the variations of those words. In case a recruiter puts different words into the system than the word you're using, you want to get variations of those words. So that's very important. I also encourage people to take a look at their professional experience. And they need to make sure it's not only relevant, but also that it doesn't read like a job description. Too often we say, this is what I did this day, this is what I do every day, and it reads like a job description. What it needs to be is accomplishment based. This is what I did for this employer, and this is what I can do for you. Try to make it quantitative as much as possible. For example, maybe you saved the employer $300,000 by doing X, Y, Z. So that's an accomplishment statement, and if I were an employer and I'd looked at that, I'd say, ooh, I really want you to do that for me, so I want to talk to you more about that. So when they look at their past experience, to take a look at that and make sure they're writing those types of statements. 10 to 15 year snapshot, all relevant experience. Going back further does a couple of things. I work a lot with the 40-plus market, and we don't want to age them. We don't want to create barriers that we can overcome on a piece of paper. So remove the 20, 30 years back of experience. Okay. Very important. And then the final piece is we don't put non-relevant personal information or activities on a resume. A lot of us are involved in volunteer work, community organizations, and that's great, and that does a lot to develop you as a person. But if the organizations you're involved in are political, religious, or even potentially otherwise kind of touchy subjects, get them off the resume. Again, you want to remove those barriers before they become barriers. And keep everything relevant. Now, if you're volunteering for an organization where you're the treasurer, and the job you want is finance related, absolutely keep that on there. That's relevant.
Okay, good stuff. Now, let's say my resume is up to par, but I'm still kind of worried about some of the semantics of putting together the perfect resume. Should I focus more on that, or again, not so much the resume aspect of it?
Again, when we look at the fact that networking is going to get you into the job, a lot of those people end up advocating for you to the employer before they even hand the resume over to the employer. So I do think it's important to have a strong resume. I don't think it's going to be necessarily your best tool in today's economy. It's an important tool, but not necessarily the one where you need to spend a lot of time sweating over it and really losing sleep. Get out there, get networking, making those connections, because those take time.
Absolutely. Great. So resumes are important, but still networking is key. Good stuff, Sharon. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk with Sharon about behavioral interviews and what that's all about. So we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Career Fast Break. I'm here with Sharon DeLay, president of BoldlyGO Coaching and HR Management, and we're talking about career advice. Now, behavioral interviews, we've heard a lot about them. They are standard now in the interview process, but what are behavioral interviews?
Excellent. Before we actually talk about behavioral interviews, I'd like to back the card up a little bit and talk about the process of selecting people to interview and a little bit about the telephone screen, because those are important in the process of interviewing. So let's look at the screening process in general. Let's say that you are an HR manager and you have a position open and you have 400 resumes come in through your HR system. What do you do with that? That's a lot of people and you can't talk to 400 people.
Right.
So we go back to those keywords and how important those are in the resume. So that does bring in the importance of the resume. HR person goes in, they pull resumes based on the keywords that they're seeking, and out of those 400 people who applied for the job, maybe 200 make that cut based on the keyword search.
Really?
That's still a lot of people to talk
Yeah.
to. So then we have another group of people who get cut out based on a visual review of the resumes to see if some of the other pieces fit or something on the resume resonated with the hiring manager. We get it down to 100 people, still quite a few. Work with me here, I know these numbers are high. So then what will happen a lot of times is the HR person may give the hiring manager a round of resumes to look at, or the HR person may go through and look at some other qualifying criteria. Let's just say we get it down to 25 people after all these different screening levels. We have a telephone screen that kicks in typically. And historically in the past, candidates have blown that off a little bit. They've not taken the telephone screen seriously because you're not looking at me.
Right.
And so it couldn't quite possibly be as important. It is actually one of the most important steps in the process now because it is a way to continually pare down the candidates that they then bring in to spend their time with. So the telephone screen is important, and a candidate needs to be prepared for that. They need to have a system in place where they can pull the job postings so they can refer to them as part of the telephone screen, and they need to be prepared to ask or answer some basic questions. Confirm what's on their resume, validate what they can do, validate some of their basic skills, knowledge, and ability.